From initial design drawing to the finished dress, you can actually make the dress you design with a base pattern, and in this case I'm using the Angelina. You need to download the pattern, cut the pieces out and attach them together with sellotape. You need red Duchesse satin for the collar, the only woven fabric for the dress, contrast jersey and skirt length, and 30 centimeters each of black and red jersey. Now you're ready to start designing. The key is to draw whatever you design onto the pattern piece. I'm starting with the front collar, which doubles up as a shoulder strap. Once you're happy with the shape, cut the collar out. Place some pattern paper underneath this section and sellotape into place. Then I place the collar back onto the pattern and draw around it. For our next pattern piece, we're going to draw across for a boob tube effect, or as I would suggest actually, you go up the armhole curve and then to the center front. Because I made 3, I realized that that look is actually best. Now cut the shape out. Now you already have 2 of your pieces. Next, cut along the lower line of the pattern, which indicates the waist. Here we're going to attach the waistband. Next, we're going to draw a straight line from the tip where the collar is going to be attached with a few hand stitches all the way down. Your pattern pieces will look slightly different to the ones that you see here, because you should go up the underarm a little bit, because it will just look better. Clearly mark your pattern pieces so you can't get confused. You put A and B on that, that always works for me. Now draw the waistband. I need it to be the same width or wider than the ribbon. So mine is about 5 centimeters wide, which I think looks best. The waistband is basically a 5 centimeter wide strip, the length of your front. So where the center fold should be, we can fold the paper over and draw around it again. I find it just easier to cut out a waistband when I haven't got a fold to work with. Now have a look how all the pieces fit together like a puzzle. When we're cutting out, we will add 1 centimeter seam allowance everywhere that we cut the pattern apart. Now we adapt the back piece. First, create a line you are happy with from the underarm to the center back. Copy the upper part of the pattern. And cut along your line. Transfer that line to the copy. And now draw the strap exactly how you think it should be. You can make it slimmer or wider, just as you like. Then check the pieces against each other and see whether you still like it, and if you do and you're happy with your shape, then you can carry on. Cut along the lower waistline just like you did on the front, and the front waistband almost fits the back as well. It's just slightly shorter in the back, so copy the waistband again and then you can trim it to fit the back pattern. There is no curve in the waistband because that really complicates things and does nothing for the look, so it's just straight. Now we have prepared all our pattern pieces, we're ready to start cutting out the dress. First, I'm cutting out my Duchesse satin collar. You need 4 of those all together. When you're cutting, add the seam allowance all the way around, apart from the shoulder. Next, we're cutting the skirt fabric. This is also the contrast, and we're doing that on the fold. Remember to add the seam allowance of 1 centimeter to the waist. And also I made the skirt a bit longer, as not everyone is 5'2" like me. so otherwise it comes up a bit short. In the black jersey, we're cutting the side front marked A and our back, and again make sure that you have the seam allowances where they need to be. For the waistband, add seam allowance lengthways but not at the sides. For the back strap, I put 2 rests on the fold and placed them on top of each other, as we again need 4. It's quite wasteful, but I wanted to make this video to show you exactly how this works, so I thought it would be clearer like this. Pin the pattern pieces into place and add the seam allowance as you cut out apart from the shoulder. As with the front, you need to make sure you've exactly got 2 pairs. Now we cut the center front, which is also put on the fold, and that's the contrast fabric again. And last not least, we can cut the facing in black jersey, which makes the dress really neat from the inside. So the facing actually goes all the way down to the waist, and I place all my front pieces apart from the skirt back together with no seam allowance gaps to cut this front facing. Now I do exactly the same at the back, and again I have the seam allowance at the top and at the waistline. Now that all the pieces are cut out, we begin putting them together. We pin everything we can and begin with the front. Place pieces in front of you with the right sides facing up. Flip over the center piece and pin. And then equally you flip over the other side and you pin that into place as well. Now we pin the Duchesse satin strips with the right sides facing on the inside. And when you're sewing, you need to leave the shoulder open and reduce the stitch length to 1.2, so it's really small when you're sewing the corner of the collar, because otherwise when you pull it all through it might fray. The back strap is pinned only on either side, which you're going to sew. You can also pin the waistband to the upper back. Please remember that when you're working with jersey, the seam needs to stretch, so every time you're stitching something you should use a triple stitch or slight zigzag. 10 minutes later, all is sewn and we start cutting back seam allowances in corners, especially in the Duchesse satin, which is a bit stiff. You need to turn the collar, work out the corners with the needle and place the collar on your ironing pile. I'm also cutting back one part of the seam allowance of the back strap. Then I turn the strap and it's also ready for ironing. My ironing pile gets bigger all the time. The front seams have to be ironed apart. Now all pieces are ironed well, I can put my collar back strap together. You can use your fingers or safety pin like me to pull the Duchesse satin collar through the jersey. So you basically have it inserted on the inside, and then I pin across the shoulder and I sew across there. Now if my jersey is a bit wider than the Duchesse satin, which is really likely because it's quite stretchy, I will just let it run into the seam. Then when that's all done, I cut across the corners to make the shoulder seam less bulky and cut the seam allowances back as well. I actually always cut them in stages and that makes the seam even flatter and it's really good. Now we can insert the strap between the back facing and the back. So pin them on so they slightly overlap, like you can see here. That way they will sit really perfectly next to each other once you've sewn the 1 centimetre seam allowance. Place the facing wrong side up on the back and pin also across the top. Then we're sewing it all together, and what you can see me doing here is the use of that triple stitch, which keeps going backwards and forwards to create a seam that can stretch. Pin the waistband to the front also, but put a few pins vertically to the seam so that they don't fold over whilst you're sewing the seam and they stay in place. You can also attach the front skirt to the front. And at last you pick up the facing and you also pin that on. So you've got another little stack now ready to be sewn. Iron all your seams really well, and once you've done that you place both of them next to each other on the table. You also want to pin on your ribbon to the back, and once that's done you just put the back dress on top of the front dress, and you literally pin it together from the top of the facing right to your hem, and that can be sewn as well. Now you want to take a little bit away from this area, because I found with the first dress that it was a little bit loose. And then at last you can pin the collar to the front, and I just slip stitch this. You need to hem the skirt, and I used a 3 centimetre turn up, and your dress is finished. So with a good basic pattern to work from, you can create any style you like. So I would suggest also having a look at the other 2 dresses that Vanessa designed to see how to insert a lace heart or make an elegant chiffon jersey dress. And if you're doing a GCSE textiles or your A-level, then I wish you the best of luck with this and hope you're very successful.
Songs were set low.